Welcome to the Co-Parenting Conversations podcast, brought to you by the Center for Divorce Education. With renowned psychologist Dr. Donald Gordon, we will delve into the complex world of co-parenting during and after divorce and separation. Join us as we explore some of the emotional, legal, and practical aspects of parental breakups, helping you navigate this transformative journey with wisdom and guidance. Whether you're currently going through a divorce, contemplating separation, or supporting a loved one in their journey, the Center for Divorce Education is here to empower you with knowledge and offer you a roadmap towards a brighter future. The information presented in this podcast is intended for educational purposes only. The presentation of this material is not intended to constitute mental health therapy or to diagnose mental health disorders. The presentation of this material is not intended to constitute legal advice. Participants are encouraged to discuss specific legal questions with a licensed attorney of their choice.
Welcome to episode 9 of the Co-Parenting Conversations podcast by the Center for Divorce Education. We provide online parenting classes for divorcing and separating parents. I'm Jamie, and today I'm here again with my colleague Chelsea, and we'll be finally discussing a very tough subject that many parents ask about: high conflict situations. Before we go any further, keep in mind that Chelsea and I are not experts. We're simply here to give our own opinions on these subjects and then hand it over to Dr. Dawn, the actual expert. So, Chelsea, we have had a few parents who took our program asking about more information on what to do in high conflict cases. What comes to mind for you?
Honestly, the high conflict parents that I come across working with customer support for our level 2 high conflict solutions parenting class tend to be my favorite, only because they're in the middle of a storm I've also been through, and I know how they're feeling to some extent. So I also know that even though it feels beyond daunting, the stress does come to an end. So when I speak with these people who are almost always about to crack from the stress, they've talked to someone that day who's holding on to some hope for them. I do think it's important to know what a high conflict case is, though. It's not to be mistaken for a domestic violence case, and also doesn't simply mean that your co-parent is a narcissistic jerk. It means the conflict between the co-parents is so significant that their struggles to communicate are affecting their ability to come to agreements regarding their children. Mediation can help, but sometimes these parents need more assistance with finding middle ground. Parenting coordinators and custody evaluators are often very helpful in these cases. But about 15% of all divorces are considered high conflict, which is 15% too many.
Yeah. Parents don't, usually intentionally hurt their kids,
Right.
But when you are so focused on the other parent being angry with them, you are inadvertently hurting your child.
I completely agree. If you aren't focused on your child and what is best for them, and instead you're spending your time angry with the other parent, then that's less energy you have to spend on being the best parent you can be. It's as simple as that. And Dr. Dawn has mentioned this in our previous podcast, but what we're talking about here is a brain chemistry thing. Parents can't attune to their child's emotions when they're under significant amounts of stress. Their brain just won't let them.
And in high conflict situations, because there is so much emotion involved, it can really help to find other outlets to keep yourself occupied as well. Instead of focusing on the hurt or anger, talk to a friend, practice deep breathing, go on walks, or really focus on things that you enjoy to do. It can be hard ending a marriage or relationship. And we even say in the program that a lot of anger actually comes from fear. So keep in mind that your co-parent is also likely feeling that same fear, whether they show it or not. And I am curious because I know you've taken the 8-hour online course before. What's your favorite parenting skill in high conflict solutions?
Empathy. We spoke about ACEs in episode 8 of our Co-Parenting Conversations podcast and how trauma can cause us to react in a certain way. These cases would go a bit more smoothly if parents learn to understand that their co-parent's trauma is what has them maybe shutting down or raging out. They can then take steps to respond in a healthy way.
Right.
All of those skills are taught in high conflict solutions too. What about you, Jamie? You've been through the program. What's your favorite high conflict solution skill?
I would say my favorite skill is actually giving the other parent the benefit of the doubt. So instead of getting angry with your co-parent because they fed the kids pizza, and you're trying to have them eat better, why don't you take a moment and think, well, maybe your co-parent is having a difficult time parenting, or maybe they didn't feel well, or maybe they just really wanted to give the kids pizza because they want to see the kids happy for the day. Reframing what the other parent is doing really can make a huge difference too. Well, let's go ahead and bring on the expert now, Dr. Don, and let's see what his thoughts are on high conflict situations.
In high conflict cases, sometimes it leads to interpersonal violence or domestic violence. And that's more likely to happen if one parent feels entitled to control the behavior of the other parent.
Mm-hmm.
And that usually precedes actual physical violence. If you're in a situation where you think the other parent is controlling you, limiting your access to your family and friends, demanding where you go, where you spend your time, it's a good thing to develop a safety plan for getting out quickly, for you and your children getting out quickly, to be able to communicate with your local domestic violence shelter. So domestic violence is common in high conflict cases, but there's ways that you can minimize the damage. Some of the skills that we teach in this high conflict program can be helpful in not triggering the other parent to become violent. For instance, iMessage is a good one, where instead of criticizing them, you talk about your feelings about their behavior, making a polite request for them to change. And a lot of domestic violence victims know how to do this. They work very hard to avoid triggering the other parent. And some of the skills we teach in the program can help you with that. You talked earlier about your favorite skills. One of my favorite skills in that program is stop, look, and listen. So when you're in a situation that's getting tense, first you survey your body to see if you're feeling tension. You stop yourself from reacting quickly. You look at all of your options. What are the different ways you can react to this? And reminding yourself that you have more than one option. You don't have to fight back. You don't have to trade insults. You don't have to run away. Look at your different options, and then listen to your better nature. Choose your best self to respond.
Right.
Even if it doesn't have a really good effect or noticeable effect on your ex, you're setting a really good example for your children when you do this. Mm-hmm. And they're learning. That's how the best way they learn is from the example that you set. Another thing to be sensitive to about high conflict, you're doing damage to yourself in this conflict. It's not just the other parent. That if you're aggressive toward the other parent, you're also doing damage to yourself, because when you're in the state of fight or flight, the amygdala, which is part of your brain that we teach you about in our high conflict program, the amygdala is the fight or flight response, and that's triggered, and the amygdala becomes active, and you don't have access to your prefrontal cortex, where you can make calm decisions, where you can be empathic, where you can be emotionally attuned to other people, including your children. You simply physically cannot access those skills. So you have to get yourself out of the fight or flight response before you can do that. Your body is generating cortisol and adrenaline, and that affects yourself greatly. It affects your brain. There's actually some evidence that you're losing gray matter in your brain the more often you're being flooded with cortisol. That's true of your children too. When they are witnessing or are hearing about or seeing an intense argument between their parents, even if they're in another room, that cortisol release stays in their body for 72 hours. So when they go to school, their ability to concentrate and focus is impaired, and their ability to regulate their emotions is impaired. So this can cause them to become a behavior problem in school. Most parents don't know this. They think, oh, kids are resilient, or they didn't really pay attention to our fight. Well, they did pay attention, and their bodies are generating cortisol, which is having an effect on their brain. Parents tell us that learning that has really helped them shield their children from conflict, that they didn't know that was happening, that it takes 72 hours for that cortisol to get out of their system.
Yeah, that's a long time.
Yeah, and you have to also watch yourself. You have to look for ways to avoid being triggered by the other parent, and to be able to give yourself other options to calm down, and so you're not triggered, so you don't get into this negative spiral that Jamie, that you and Chelsea were talking about, this vortex.
Right.
Another factor is that when you were in the fight or flight mode, you're not aware and don't have any compassion for the suffering of your child's other parent. So they too are suffering.
Right.
And they're unhappy and they're stressed and they're having damage to their brain as well. And if this is a person that you once loved, that you shared goals, lifetime goals with, and even though right now you're in the middle of a fight and don't feel any compassion, that's something that you can develop, that they're also suffering.
Thank you, Don, for being here. We appreciate you all, and thanks for tuning in. See you next time.